For most people, walking is such a natural part of everyday life that they may not stop to think about how it works. This video will give you a more in-depth understanding of how gait, or in other words, walking, works. What is gait? Gait is typically defined as a method of locomotion involving the use of the two legs alternatively to provide both support and propulsion, with at least one foot being in contact with the ground at all times. But this basically just means walking. Gait is also typically divided into two phases, the stance phase and swing phase. Stance phase describes when the leg we're focusing on is on the ground, and swing phase describes when it's being swung through the air. It's as simple as that. After being divided into stance and swing phases, gait is further subdivided into these 7 events. The first event is called initial contact, and it's when your heel first touches the ground when you take a step. In this diagram, it's the right leg, which is colored gray. The next event is opposite toe off, and it's when the toe of the blue foot, or your opposite foot, leaves the ground. The next event is heel rise, and it's the moment the heel first begins to leave the ground. Opposite initial contact is the point at which the blue heel first contacts the ground. Next is toe off, and it's the moment at which the toe first leaves the ground. Next is feet adjacent, and that is when the foot that's swinging through the air, your gray one, is even with the foot on the ground, the blue. The final event is called tibia vertical, and that just means when the shin is straight up and down relative to the ground. So now, let's take what we have learned and apply it to an example of normal gait. For this portion of the video, we will be reviewing the normal gait pattern of a 24-year-old male subject. This is initial contact. When his heel hits the ground, you notice that the toes are pointed up on his front foot. You also notice that both of his knees are straight, or in other words, extended. Looking at his hip, you also see that his right hip is slightly bent forward or flexed. This is opposite toe off. Look at his left leg. His toes leave the ground once his right foot becomes flat. The left knee begins to flex in order to prepare the foot to swing. His right knee is also flexed because his body weight is shifting onto that leg. This is heel rise. The heel on his right foot is just beginning to leave the ground. The right knee is in a neutral position, and the left leg is about halfway through its swing. Notice, the left ankle is at about 90 degrees, which makes sure his toes don't hit the ground during swing. This is opposite initial contact. The toe is now the only part of the back foot in contact with the ground, and the knee is slightly flexed. The foot is now in a position to push off to continue moving the body's weight onto the left leg. During toe off, the back foot is now completely off the ground and all body weight is transferred to the left leg. Both the knee and hip of the right leg are beginning to flex in order to swing the lower part of the leg forward. Feet adjacent occurs when the foot in swing phase is next to the leg located on the ground. When looking at the toe in swing, you can see that it is now lifting upwards, which is also known as dorsiflexion. You also see the knee is flexed, and both of these actions are to keep the foot from dragging on the ground. This is tibia vertical. His right leg has almost completed its swing, and the toes are still pointed up to prepare the heel to make contact with the ground. And now we're back to initial contact, and have completed a single stride. Another way we determine if a gait pattern is normal is by checking to see if it meets all 5 attributes of gait. These attributes are a way for us to identify gait issues and can be used to see if a treatment has been effective. The first attribute is stability and stance. This simply means your ability to balance on one leg during the stance phase of gait. The second is foot clearance and swing, and this is the ability to avoid dragging your toe on the floor to prevent tripping during swing. The third is prepositioning of the foot for initial contact, lifting your toes up to place your heel on the ground first during initial contact. 4 is adequate step length, and this just means taking equal steps of appropriate length on each side. 5 is conservation of energy. This is walking in a functional manner to save time and energy. With these 5 attributes in mind, now let's look at an example of abnormal gait. This is an example of one of the most common gait deviations that occur. Looking at this video, the first thing that you see is his knee flexing more than a normal gait. This is to help clear his foot. You can also see that it is not just the heel contacting the ground first, but the whole mid portion of the foot. This is all a result of the ankle's inability to dorsiflex, which means he doesn't have the ability to bend his ankle upwards. Due to the lack of dorsiflexion, both the knee and hip have to flex or bend more than normal to make sure he doesn't trip. However, if you look at his right leg, it is going through a fairly normal gait pattern. For most people, walking is such a natural part of everyday life that they don't ever stop to think about how it works. After watching this video, we hope you are more aware of how something that may seem so simple initially is actually very complex.